Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this live session on the strategy for the last 3 months, the next last 3 months before the Clat paper, right? So we are on our final run now, the home run. Just last about 3 odd months left before you actually write your Clat paper, right? So before we begin, let me just do a quick audio visual check. I'm hoping that I am audible and I'm visible to everybody. Let's do a quick audio visual check before we begin with the session today, right? So we are going to focus on the important, very important things which you need to keep in mind in these last 3 months, so far as your legal reasoning is concerned. In fact, what you will realize is when we talk about legal reasoning, some of the things that we will discuss apply not only to legal reasoning but to most other sections also, because end of the day, your idea behind preparing right now is to crack the Clat exam, right? So legal reasoning section, yes, and it is of course one of the most important sections considering the weightage and other factors which go in, but some of the things that we will discuss would come in handy for other parts of the Clat paper also, right? So quickly tell me that I'm audible, I'm visible to everybody. Just put a hi in the chat box, yes in the chat box, and then we shall begin. Okay. Then let's start. I think I've got a yes, and I think I should be going now. Let's begin then. Now, the first things first. I have an audience here which is going to be a mixed audience, right? So there would be people who would be at different stages so far as their preparation for Clat is concerned. There would be students who have dropped the year, so they have been preparing for a relatively longer period of time, and you are now kind of midway somewhere in your preparation where you might have done with your basics and you are more into practice now. So this session here today is going to help these kind of people also who are somewhere ahead in their preparation. And then the session is also meant for somebody who's in class 12. Now this person would be the one who is trying to do the balancing act. I know it's a very difficult task, having your 12th boards, having your school commitments, and at the same time you're preparing for your Clat also. So the amount of time which each one of these category of people is able to devote for Clat preparation would also be different, right? But then always remember, Clat exam is not about the number of hours you put in, but Clat exam is rather about the efficiency, right? So therefore, to talk about being efficient, even if you are somebody who's just begun, maybe you're somebody who just thought that, okay, Clat is one option I would like to keep open, and these 3 months I maybe would like to give a shot to giving the Clat paper. Or if you're somebody who had started off with the preparation, but after a while you had not really been very upbeat with your prep. So even though you had started off taking classes somewhere, but you were not really into preparing, so I would keep you also in the just begun category. So for a person like that also, today's session will come in handy. These are tips, tricks, certain basic things which will help you to ensure that you actually get a good rank in the Clat. Because end of the day, there's one thing which is going to stay constant for any section, for the entire Clat paper, is that you have to be efficient. When you are looking at the Clat prep paper, all the sections of the Clat paper, apart from maybe the GK section, the rest of the sections are basically based on understanding and application, right? So this understanding and application is something which you can do if you study consistently and efficiently, right? So you don't need to spend like 8 to 10 hours a day. But what really matters is spending whatever time, if you're in your class 12, the only amount of time you can give to Clat's preparation right now, especially maybe, some of you might have your half yearlies around the corner, your midterms around the corner, you might have your, your first set of pre-boards coming up somewhere in October or something. So even if you are somebody who is in that category, you devote at least a minimum of 4 hours a day. That is sufficient for Clat preparation. That will take you home and give you a good result in your Clat if you are able to consistently, in a dedicated manner, able to put about 4 hours a day also. If you're somebody who's a dropper, you have an advantage there. You could put in about 6 hours plus, right? If you've just begun, I would want you, if you really are very, very serious, put in about 6 hours a day. But these are the hours which you need to put in consistently every day. Consistency is the super important key, which is going to help you in clearing your Clat paper. Because Clat, like I said, is an understanding-based paper. It is not a paper which you can crack by studying for a month before. Because it needs understanding. That understanding comes with practice. So practice needs at least some bit of time, right? So generally about 3 months, if you are able to consistently, so even if you're in this category, this category, this category, you're in any of these categories, but you feel that, you're not able to achieve, or you feel that you're not achieving your full potential, or there's something amiss. These 3 months are sufficient for you to actually take that leap, So even if today you're getting about 30, 40 in your mocks, that's fine. You have 3 months, right? Don't get disheartened by this, just 3 months are left. No, that is why we are having this session right now. Otherwise, we could have had this session just a month before. Okay, 30 days, how do you prepare for Clat? That's difficult. That's understandable. Then those are just last minute strategies. But here, when you're talking about 3 months before, you still have time to see where you stand. And if you follow some of the tips which I give you here, I'm sure you'll see results. Okay, so just be consistent and practice, understand and practice. Very, very important. Understanding, and this understanding will help you in practicing and getting good scores in your mocks also, right? So that is something which is very, very important. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, there are some questions here. I would be dealing them in a bit. Don't worry. See, okay, now Brits is asking me a very pertinent question. Says, which section should I do in a mock first? See, out of the 5 sections which are there in the mock, it depends upon your comfort level, which section do you want to do first, right? Usually, what it is advisable is, don't do 2 reading sections together. What happens is, if you're doing, let's say you've done legal, immediately after legal, if you pick up something like CR, then by the time you are in the second or the third passage of your critical reasoning, it becomes a little too much. You might get overwhelmed because of it, right? Or your brain stops functioning at its prime or its most optimum level, right? So generally, it's a good idea to keep like a GK or a maths somewhere in between 2 reading sections. First 2 is still okay back to back, but a third section, not advisable at all. So between the second and the third, at least you need to have another buffer thing, which will be different, so that different set of muscles, your brain muscle, different part of your muscles is exercised, and it's not just continuous reading which you are doing, right? So that is something which is generally advisable. Otherwise, it's always a good idea. You have 3 months right now, so the next 5 mocks which you do, change the order in which you are writing your mock, right? Try for 2 mocks, try 1 order. The next mock, try another order, right? So that you can figure out for yourself which is the best fit. Because frankly, हर किसी का अपना comfort level होता है अलग-अलग subject के साथ. So to expect that one particular pattern will fit each and every person would be very, very difficult, right? So इसीलिए अपने हिसाब से you can figure out what suits you the best, right? So keep that in mind, and that's going to help you. But one suggestion to everybody, do not keep the section which you find to be the most difficult section. The section which is your, section which is like your biggest fear, your nemesis, आपको सबसे खराब लगता है, आपको डर लगता है, चाहे वो आपका क्वांट का सेक्शन हो, चाहे आपका जीके का सेक्शन, चाहे सीआर का सेक्शन हो, जो भी सेक्शन है आपका, ये sections में से जो सबसे difficult section है उसको कभी भी last नहीं रखना है. Never keep the section which you despise, the one which you fear the most, as the last one. Because agar aap isko last mein rakhoge, what will end up is somewhere on this subconsciously, you will end up not giving much time to the last section, right? So you will not have time for that section that you don't want to, any which ways are not very fond of. And secondly, by then your brain is any which way is fried, you would have been doing all the sections before that. Agar aap usko last mein rakhoge, वैसे ही आपको difficult लगता है, right? It's so difficult, you can't understand. On top of that, it is the last thing. So by then you're any which way is tired. तो जो वो बुरा होता है, वो last की वजह से और बुरा होगा, right? So don't do this. This is a very wrong practice. उसको कोई बीच में रख लो. I understand. Starting में नहीं रखना. It will kind of lower your morale or something, but don't keep it in the end also. Okay, so that's something which you keep in mind. Take it. Chalo. Okay, now let's move forward. Now, the next thing which you need to keep in mind is, what is the effect of the change in pattern? This year, there is a big change that we see in your Clat pattern, and the big change is generally it's a refreshing change. You would, when in the first time when you look at it, it feels refreshing, because so for the same amount of time, for the 120 minutes, the 2 hours, you are going to get, instead of 150 questions, you are going to get 120 questions only. Right? So there is a breather of 30 odd questions which you are getting. And this breather is something which has happened percentage wise, right? So when you look at the legal section, your CR section, GK section, the percentage basically remains the same. So far as the legal section is concerned, you do have 25% of the paper, which is the legal section, right? Now, what is going to be the most likely effect of this change? It would result in people having more attempts, right? Because now you're getting more amount of time for each question. So there is a likelihood of the attempts being higher, and there is also a likelihood of higher accuracy, because you have more time to gauge your options. But the fact that you're getting these 30 minutes extra, not 30 minutes extra, sorry, the fact that you'll be getting 30 questions less should not, make you start feeling that, oh, now I can easily do it. I'm sure that initial happiness, which all of you felt when those 30 questions were reduced, and especially those of you who were used to giving mocks at 150 questions per mock, but now that reduced to 120, for the first couple of mocks, you would be very happy that, wow, this so much of extra time I'm getting. But after the third or the fourth mock, you realize that now you're somehow subconsciously, your brain works in such a manner that you are taking almost the same amount of time and you're still not able to complete your paper, right? I'm sure most of you will relate to it. You would have thought that, yes, I'll be able to complete my paper. But again, the same thing is happening. So that is something which you need to take stock of. Because end of the day, when you are giving your mock, what is most crucial is that the time which you have set for each and every section. Right? So that section-wise time which you have set, okay, like for the English section, let's say I've given 30 minutes, 25 minutes. For the CR section, similar. For the legal section, let's say I've given 35 to 40 minutes. So here, it shouldn't be that I'm thinking that for the legal section, since there are 35 to 40 minutes now, so now I don't have to, put in, I don't have to move very fast. That should not be the scenario, because that will not do nothing but it'll end up you not being able to finish your sections on time, right? So just be careful about the timelines. These are something very, very crucial, right? And like I always say, those of you who come to the mock analysis or who come to my classes, you would know that whenever you are doing your mock, you always do section-wise division of time, right? That is something which is very, 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 very crucial. You cannot just start writing a mock और लिखते ही जा रहे हो, करते ही जा रहे हो, नहीं. आपको हर सेक्शन का टाइम आपने सेट करा हुआ है. जैसे ही आपका टाइम खत्म होता है, you stop that section right there. You move on ahead to the next section, right? You don't get too emotionally attached to a section and feel कि नहीं, इस बार I have prepared for CR so much, I am only going to attempt all the questions on CR. So no, that's not how you do it. You never leave a section. You attempt all sections, right? एक बार आपने सब attempt कर लिया, then maybe the section you are weak in, you were able to go through it quickly because you did not know much. That's perfectly fine. Then you go back to the section which you were confident about and which you had left because of paucity of time, right? But you do not continue in the same vein, right? So do keep that in mind, right? That is something which is very, very important. Okay. Now, so far as the legal reasoning section is concerned, the legal reasoning section, I'm sure all of you are aware, is the tiebreaker section, right? So therefore, even though GK and legal both have 25% marks so far as the entire Clat score is concerned, so both of them are very major sections, but legal also has this extra edge of being a tiebreaker, right? So therefore, generally it's a good idea that when you're spending those 35 to 40 minutes in your legal section, you try to have as high an attempt as possible, right? You try to attempt, at least you should be in a position that you read through all the questions and you've tried to attempt. So if the only reason why you've not marked an answer in the OMR should be because you are unsure of the answer. It should not be because you could not attempt that question, right? Because here legal section is crucial because it is the one which will decide which college you would go to also, because your hierarchy, your merit, your ranking would also depend on your legal reasoning section. So if both people have got around 7, let's say 80.5, so if two people have got 80.5, and which is very likely, because normally when it comes down to marks like 70s and 80s, where most of the people would be generally going in to the national law universities, you would see there are a lot of people with the same score. And then the tiebreaker comes in legal reasoning section, right? Something which is very, very essential. Okay. Chalo, let's move forward. Mukul, we will do that, bacha, just a minute, and I will take those doubts of yours from there. Chalo, let's move forward. Now, when you look at the legal reasoning passages, now there is a certain type of basically passages which are there, right? So from 2020 onwards, we know there has been a pattern change so far as the legal section is concerned, major pattern change, right? When we had in the legal section, in the English section, the CR section. So 2020 onwards, we have passages which are there. Now, what are these passages based on? Right. First thing that your passages are based on are your core legal theory based passages. Of course, everybody knows you have passages on your torts, contracts, constitutional law, criminal law, right? So those are your torts, contracts, constitutional law, criminal law. Those are your basic laws on which your core legal theory passages are based. In addition to that, in addition to these four, generally I like to keep topics like your personal laws. Now, personal laws, again, are topics on which we have seen a lot of questions being based. You have personal laws, you have a little bit of environment law, IPR related laws, right? So these are the kind of topics which are generally going to be covered in your class. The first four in great detail, the last 3 or 4 in a little bit of not too much detail, but yes, enough so that you're able to attempt a question which is based on these concepts, right? So generally, like Mukul here is also saying, ma'am, here these are the topics which is something which we are already doing and which is done so thoroughly in all the classes that we've had. So maybe if you're having classes with us, you are thorough with them, of course. And even if you are somewhere else also, most of the places you would realize that your core legal passage-based questions are not difficult because you're comfortable with those passages, right? So this, if you get a passage on these concepts, then this is generally an edge you have in the sense that there is you are able to solve them quickly, your accuracy is better, so that is how it helps. So far as the next one is concerned, this is where most of you face problems. Like Mukul here was also asking me, ma'am, I get good marks when it comes down to torts and criminal law, but when it comes to current laws or court judgments, I score worse. Right. So this is something which we would be discussing a little later also. So, these are passages which are based on things which have been in news, things which are like your new acts, bills, any kind of amendments made to laws, right? Judgments which are there, which the Supreme Court or some of the major high courts have given. So these are the basis of your current legal knowledge-based passages, right? We will have a more detailed discussion about this in a few minutes. So I'm leaving it here. Okay, Nandini has a question here. She's saying, ma'am, what about preparation according to new IPC? Bacha, the new IPC, firstly, is merely a bill right now, right? So the new IPC is not really the new IPC right now, right? It's a bill which has just been introduced in the parliament. It doesn't really have any kind of legal sanction right now. It will be some time before it actually turns into an act, right? So the only relevant thing about it right now would be, yes, we would, in fact, not today, but maybe next week or something, we would have a session on a comparative sort of analysis between the new bill and the IPC. And when we have this analysis, what you would realize is majorly, whatever were the provisions of the IPC have been incorporated in the bill, just the sections have been shuffled, and there are certain things which have been added and certain things which have been changed, certain things which have been deleted, right? So this is what we will have a discussion on, that what has been added, what has been changed, what has been deleted, right? But so far as preparation for your core theory based passages is concerned, the criminal still remains the way it was. In fact, today also, if there is a crime which is committed, you are going to get punished under the IPC, right? You're not going to be punished under the new bill, the name of which itself is a tongue twister, right? So that is not what is in force right now. Okay, so that is something which we will deal with. Okay, now next is this third category on which your legal passages are based. Now, what happens is core is something you are very comfortable with. Contemporary, I feel there is a certain level of comfort, especially if you are somebody who has been reading newspapers, which from the time you start preparing for your Clat exam, each and every faculty keeps harping on this, whether it's the legal faculty, GK faculty, of course, or it's the English faculty, or it is the critical reasoning CR faculty. Everybody keeps telling you that for 4 out of 5 sections of the Clat paper, newspaper reading is something which is very, very critical. So if you are somebody who's been reading newspapers, who has been doing eclectic reading, reading about various changes in the legal scenario, whether it's a new bill, act, amendment, judgment. If you have been keeping yourself updated with what is happening around you, even though you might not have made notes, right? So I'm not saying that you've actually made notes for GK, no. But if you're somebody who merely just reads the newspaper to keep yourself updated, would also be comfortable with any kind of contemporary and legal knowledge-based passage. Why? Because when it comes down to these passages, end of the day, your answer has to come from within this passage. The fact that you are aware of this topic will make you feel comfortable when you are reading the passage, and it will improve your understanding of the question which is given in the passage, right? So that is why reading newspapers here comes in handy. Now, when it comes down to this third type of questions, now this is where I feel the most surprise kind of questions come from, because this is a topic for which generally it's not really very possible to prepare. Why? Because if you look at the NLU Consortium's website, you would realize from the website that, in the paper pattern where they've given what all will come in the legal reasoning section, all they have said is that they're going to give you a passage which will have some legal principles, and you'll get questions based on that. They haven't told you what those legal principles are going to be, right? So they could be from legal theory, what any of these topics which you do in class, current, or sometimes you get topics which are completely new. Like I'll give you an example in the 2022 paper. This was a paper in which there were these surprise legal theory based passages. There was passages which were based on international law. There was this concept of monism and dualism. Such in-depth study of international law normally is not expected from a Clat student, right? So if you get a passage like this, generally you would get a little apprehensive, a little afraid, the moment you see the concept, it's something very new. But then always remember, the Clat consortium is not there to take your happiness. Like the Clat consortium is not that sadistic. So even if they're giving you a concept which is completely new, a concept which you have never come across, but then the questions are also on the same lines, right? So the legal theory-based passages would, I feel, come as a surprise. There are passages which are based on concepts of law, which might not have been in news also. So it's not as though you've really come across them in some newspaper or something. So they might come to you as a bouncer, as a surprise. But the only way to go about dealing with such passages which are bound to happen, mind you, this is something which is bound to repeat itself, So if this happens, all you need to do is have a calm, cool mind, read the passage. And if you have done the first 2 bit ka preparation अच्छे से, अगर आपने contemporary करंट लीगल नॉलेज जो है अच्छे से तैयार करा है, कोर लीगल थियरी बेस्ड पैसेज अच्छे से तैयार करे हैं, देन अटेम्प्टिंग अ प्योर सरप्राइज लीगल थियरी पैसेज विल नॉट बी डिफिकल्ट बिकॉज यू आर कंफर्टेबल विद द लीगल लैंग्वेज. आपको लैंग्वेज से कंफर्ट है, आपको अब जो है you are not struggling with trying to understand what does the passage mean, because even agar kuch naya hai, you are still used to reading new things, right? So don't worry on that. Okay, so when you're looking at the legal theory-based papers, 22 ka paper is something which was really good with that. You had monism, dualism, you even had environment law principles with ecocentrism and anthrocentric and things like that, concepts which are very, very different, very, very new. In fact, last year's paper also, generally it was based on very current contemporary passages, but then there's one passage on NALSA, which is your National Legal Services Authority, which is basically giving you free legal aid. Right? So that was also a sort of a theory-based passage, because this is not something which was in news in the past 1 year or 2 years, right? So you do get passages which are based on legal theory also. So that's your surprise package, which you should always be ready for, right? That is something which is important. Okay, Nandini is asking, ma'am, what is the current affair? What do you... Acha, I will just tell you. See, when you talk about current affairs is not like current affairs in GK, frankly. Current affairs here is on the lines of being about 3 years to 5 years. So 3 years minimum, I feel, is something which is what you need to keep in mind. Okay, I'll just come to that in a bit again, Nandini. Okay, so but that's generally time frame that we keep in mind. Okay, so next what we have is the main and the most important thing. The first thing which you need to have so far the next 3 months is concerned. Now, if you are somebody who is already very, very interested and has a lot of plans, that's perfectly fine. Or if you are somebody who is, in that timetable zone, that okay, morning 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 6 o'clock to 6:30 this, 6:30 to 7:30 this, 7:15 to 7:20 this. If you are somebody who already has a a tight schedule drawn like that, for that person also I have something to say, because when you are talking about having a plan, here when you're talking about having a plan, I'm asking you to have a master plan. Master plan for the next 3 months, right? So have a broad plan in your mind. Firstly, have a broad plan that, okay, how do you intend covering the syllabus that is left? Or if you are somebody who has not started, so either you are somebody who is thinking that, okay, everything is complete, so now what do I do? Or if you are somebody who's okay, syllabus is left, right? So these things is left, that is left. So now what? Or if you're somebody who's like, okay, I'm beginning. So now what, right? If you are any of these 3 categories, you need to have your master plan ready. That for the next 3 months, how am I going to proceed? It is a very, very bad idea to just keep studying, because what happens is that sometimes you feel that you're putting in like 7 hours, 8 hours a day, but you don't see the results in your mocks. You give a mock and you are still somehow struggling. You cannot maybe bridge that barrier of 50, 60, 70. You're always stuck somewhere in those marks, right? Even despite the fact that you're putting so much of effort. So always remember, whenever we are studying, we have to study smart. You can't just keep doing drudgery. राइट? ऐसा नहीं है कि तुम पढ़ते जा रहे हो पढ़ते जा रहे हो पढ़ते जा रहे हो फिर कोई रिजल्ट नहीं आ रहा है. सो फॉर स्टडिंग स्मार्ट यू नीड टू हैव एटलीस्ट अ ब्रॉड मास्टर प्लान, कि आपने एक ब्रॉड मास्टर प्लान बनाया है कि बॉस जिससे आपको ये दिख रहा है कि फाइन in the next 3 months generally a basic idea which has to be there कि चाहे आप किसी ही भी कैटेगरी में हो, by October, end of October, all your syllabus has to be complete. And I'm not just talking about legal here, I'm talking about everything. In all your 5 sections, generally your syllabus has to be complete. Now, so far as your current legal is concerned, now if you see last year's paper where we got most of the passages from current, the last question or the question which dealt with the most latest passage was for November 22. The paper that year was so this was about mid-November is when this incident had taken place, which was there in the passage, and December 2nd week was the exam last year, right? So this year also, that is why I think it is a safe bet to keep a cutoff of about 10th, max to max 15th. Preferably because our exam is right in the first week of December. So 10th to 15th is generally the cutoff which you keep for your current legal also. Right, which again brings me back to the point that end of October is when everything is complete at least once, right? At least once everything is complete. If you are somebody who's in this category, who is, let's say, who's a dropper, who's been prepared or who's been preparing for the past 2 years or who's been preparing for a long period of time, then your revision should also be complete by October. Right? And for everybody else, at least once everything is completed by October, right? So that when you are in your November is solely given for revision, right? So you have to have a master plan in your mind, a broad category wise, section wise, that, okay, this is something which I will do. This is something which I have to finish off, right? So this is a broad master plan you have to have in your mind, right? And along with that broad master plan, then you set goals, right? You set goals with a smaller timeline, right? So you can set weekly goals or maybe a 10 days a week goal, but you need to set your goals and have a plan in mind. Without this, it will be very difficult for you to keep track of your preparation, because you need to keep track. Okay, this is what I have done and this is what is left, right? So that is something which is very, very important, right? And when it comes down to how much time do I give for Clat? A minimum, like we already discussed, 4 to 6 hours is something which you need to give. And keep in mind, you don't need to study all the 5 subjects every day. In fact, that is a bad idea. If you're somebody who's thinking, I'll do all the 5 subjects every day, no, that's a very bad idea. The one subject which you will always do every day, of course, is GK, right? That goes without saying, right? GK is something which you will do every day. That apart, you can then choose, do about 2 more subjects. So you could do maybe, like here, Brits is saying that I do CRRC interchangeably. That's perfectly fine. So that's your call, which 2 more subjects that you want to do in those 4 to 6 hours. But GK is every day, and 2 more subjects, depending upon where you need more, subjects in which you need more time, more prep, which is your weak point, which is your strong point, completely dependent on that. You need to spend your time, right? But at least have these timelines, have these goals, because that is something which will keep you motivated also. Because that, especially now, I feel, if you're somebody who's been preparing for the past 6 months, this is the time when you start losing motivation also. This is the time when you start feeling, I think I've done enough, but you don't see the results. So feel like, agar itne time se nahi kar paaye, to ab kahan se kar lenge last 3 months? All that, those feelings start setting in somehow, somewhere, but always remember, the reason why you're not getting the result is not because of the fact that you're not studying, but that maybe it is because you're not studying smartly. Just shuffle up your system. Just, get yourself out of that groove ki itne time se nahi hua to aage nahi hoga. Aisi baat nahi hai. Hota hai. Generally, if you will see, people who go to the top law schools are not the ones who are always been studying for the entire time. There are a lot of students who put in their best in the last 3-4 months and are also able to get the results, right? But the only thing is you have to have that, that feeling that you would want to do that, right? So you have to motivate yourself, and you motivate yourself by setting goals, of course, which are realistic, right? We are not talking about unrealistic goals. You think that, okay, I'll study for 8 hours in a day from now. Ma'am has said, set goals and you have to study, you have to finish. So 8 hours in a day, I will finish. No, not 8 hours in a day. That is not realistic at all. So you take, goals which you can actually achieve depending upon your situation, right? So set realistic targets, give you 100%. Maybe, especially to start with, you might not be achieving the goals that you have set. That's perfectly fine. That's understandable. But even if you're not able to achieve the set goals, this does not mean, or this does not deter you from setting more goals. जो नहीं हो पाया, ठीक है. I tried my 100%. I tried my level best. नहीं हो पाया, I will move on. राइट उतना डिटैचमेंट रख के भी प्रिपरेशन करना है, ठीक है ना. थोड़ा सा इसलिए बोलते हैं डिटैच्ड भी रहते हैं. अपने एग्जाम में जो पेपर लिख रहे होते हैं उससे भी डिटैच रहना है, और अपने पेपर प्रिपरेशन से भी. दैट फाइन, आई गिव माय 100%, बट हैव दैट सेटिस्फैक्शन, बिकॉज नोबडी एल्स कैन टेल यू कि भाई ये आपको सेटिस्फैक्शन मिल रही है नहीं मिल रही है. दिस यू वुड नो योरसेल्फ. योर पेरेंट्स और योर पियर्स जो देख रहे हैं आपको प्रिपेयर करते हुए, उन सबको दिखाने के लिए आप नहीं प्रिपेयर कर रहे हो, आपको भी पता है, ठीक है ना. दिस इज नॉट जस्ट टू सैटिस्फाई योर पेरेंट्स, दिस इज फॉर योर ओन फ्यूचर, ठीक है. तो अपनी तरफ से अगर लगता है मैंने 100% दिया तो ठीक है, यू मूव ऑन, राइट. सो डोंट फील बैड, यू डोंट हैव टू setting goals should not lead to you feeling depressed कि भाई क्या हो रहा है. That is not the purpose. The purpose is to keep you motivated, right? That is why I never suggest a timetable. There is a difference between a schedule and a timetable, ठीक है. timetable होता है कि आपने मिनट बाय मिनट का रखा हुआ है, वो नहीं करना है. We need to have a broad schedule. What is it that we are trying to achieve? ठीक. So this is what is there in. अच्छा, अब ना मेरे को एक ये ट्रू आंसर ने में से एक डाउट पूछा है here. He is asking me, ma'am, what is the ideal score in each section? Boss, always remember, when we are looking at the Clat paper, in the Clat paper, it is not about the ideal score. Rather, it is about your rank. Right? So, sorry guys. So it is not about the ideal score, it is rather about your rank. Because sometimes if you're giving a mock, if the mock is very difficult, let's say it's a very difficult sort of a mock, right? The difficulty level in each and every section is high. Then in that case, even though your score is less, but your rank might have been affected inversely. Your rank might have become the same, less, or even high for that matter, right? So always remember, rather than the perfect score, what should be in each section, always look at your sectional rank and your total rank. कि भाई मेरा rank कितना आया है? Because end of the day, जब paper finally Clat का exam भी होता है, उसमें भी अगर difficult paper आए तो cut-offs अपने आप लो जाती हैं. And then what matters is where you're standing relatively, rather than what your individual score is. Right? So keep that in mind. So your idea always has to be to get the best score possible in each and every section, right? Because there is no cutoff here as such, right? There is no cutoff here, right? So keep that in mind. So there is no ideal score for each section so far that is concerned. Okay. Okay. Chalo. Next thing is, the next important thing which you need to do in the next 3 months is revision of your core theory, right? Now, in the past, we've got about 3-4 years papers. So we've got 2020, we have 2021, we have 2022, and we have 2023, right? Now, in all these 3-4 papers that we've had as per the new pattern, every year has a different surprise for us. So far as core theory questions are concerned. Like in 2020, it was a mixed bag. There were more questions which were contemporary in nature, and there were less questions which were based on theory, but there was legal theory in the 2020 paper. You did have questions on strict liability, absolute liability, and things like that. 2021 then saw a trend of it being a mixed bag. Right? So there were questions which are based on contracts, there were questions which are based on constitution, and then there were questions which we just discussed, like pure legal theory-based papers, questions like monism and your environment law-based questions. So it was a mixed bag. 22 then saw a return of the core theory based papers, right? So you had a lot of questions on contracts, about almost three passages on contracts, a passage on torts, a passage on constitution. So there was a lot of passages which was from theory and less stress from contemporary. 2023 saw almost all passages were from contemporary legal or current legal knowledge, right? This year, again, so therefore, if you look at it from 20 to 23, there has been a mixed bag of on what basis your passages are going to be framed. So to say that since it was last year all contemporary, this year it will be all contemporary is a little difficult, right? So don't think that because of last year's paper, I should not at all bother about the core theory subjects. What I would recommend is, this is one thing which for sure, if a passage comes, you are going to do very well. And it is not only going to, increase your speed, increase your accuracy, but generally it will save you time also. It will save you time and it will boost your morale. So therefore, don't completely give up on your core theory. I would recommend do a quick revision of most of your theory topics. So, go ahead, do a revision, revise everything that is there, a quick revision. Not, you don't need to go in details, but like, let's say, just the chief important elements of each and every, if it's a tort, then like, let's say if you're doing malicious prosecution or if you're negligence, just do a quick revision of what are the ingredients. Similarly, when you're doing criminal law, theft ke bhai ingredients kya hai, quick ek revision karo. Should not take more than 2-3 hours per subject, like for torts, for criminal, for everything. Just a 2-3 hours quick revision. I would recommend that you do it somewhere around October, right? If you are somebody who has been, preparing for a long time or just started preparing, then maybe, you would be doing this once at least. So do it once at least. Don't just leave it, right? Because this will really help in boosting your confidence, right? So in October, otherwise you should do at least one round of revision. A quick revision is what you do. And this revision, theory revision, should always be followed up by practice questions. Right now, these practice questions could be in the form of a sectional test, which is given, like we have section-wise, topic-wise sectional test there in your LMS. Or if you're in any other place, you would also have, section-wise questionnaire tests, these practice tests available to you. Go ahead and practice. Practice is something where you realize that whether you understood the concept or not, right? So this is something which is very, very important. Now, another reason why these core theory topics become very essential for your legal reasoning section is always understand, these basics are always going to help you in understanding the complex. Meaning thereby that, what happens is that if you are clear in a basic understanding of law, it teaches you certain basic legal terms, it teaches you the correct perspective as to how you are supposed to apply a legal principle to a fact situation, right? And in a very simple manner. Right. So once you have the basic understanding, then you can use that basic understanding in any kind of passage. Right. So that is why having a good command over your core theory is something which will always help you in your legal reasoning section, irrespective of the fact whether you get a direct question on legal theory or not. Right. So keep that in mind. So don't just give up on it. Okay. So that is something which you do. Then the next thing which is important for your preparation is, of course, the past year question papers, right? Then we are talking about the past year question papers. Your past year question papers are going to be on both. I'm talking about the new pattern, of course, and the old pattern, right? So we are talking about all the past year question papers from 2020, 21, 22, 23, right? So all of them, and of course the sample papers also. Sample papers are your 2020 sample papers, 2023 you had 2 sets of sample papers, 2024 you have one smallish sample paper which has been given. So solve all the past year papers that you can, right? At least from 2020 onwards you have to solve them. Not once, at least 2 or 3 times you should solve them, right? Because it's once you solve them, you kind of understand it, right? and you might not be able to attempt it completely, then give it a little bit of time, give like, so I would recommend that one set of solving, at least the new pattern, has to be done right now. Give it a shot right now, so that you will know what is the actual paper pattern, what is the actual trend so far as the exam is concerned, right? When you're writing your mocks are something else. They're based on the pattern of the Clat. But when you're actually writing the Clat, when you're actually writing the sample papers from the previous years, that is when you actually understand what is the trend, what is the pattern, how are the questions framed. Now, sometimes, I get complaints that, ma'am, is mock mein questions bahut lengthy the. Because if you see last year's paper, when you see 2023 paper, some of the passages were lengthy, and not only the passages, even the questions were so lengthy. Like there's this entire passage on internet blocking. And that internet blocking, the passage itself was big, and even the fact situations, the questions there were also pretty lengthy, right? So when Clat is saying that each passage is going to be around 450 words, they are only talking about the passage. They are not including the length of the question in that, right? So there could be a scenario where you do have a passage or two in your mock, which in your final paper, which is lengthy, right? So you have to get used to that also, right? And similarly, when you look at the question paper trend, from 2020, every year there has been a different types of question which are asked. Like the 2023 paper, the majority of the questions were fact situation based questions. You had a set of facts, and every question was building upon those set of facts. Whereas when you look at the 2021 paper, that paper was different. That paper had more of understanding based questions, what is correct as per the passage, what is incorrect as per the passage, what is correct as per the author of the passage. So all those kind of questions were asked in 2021. So you would be able to gauge all this when you actually solve these past year papers, right? So this is something which is very, very essential. And when you are solving them, again, solve them in a manner that you actually understand. Don't just solve them and move ahead. Solve them, analyze them properly. Try to deduce, try to understand what is special about this paper, right? How was it different from the last year's paper? Do that comparative analysis yourself. When you are able to arrive at analysis yourself, that is when you understand it better. I can always tell you can always learn from another source. YouTube में बहुत वीडियो मिल जाती हैं, आप कहीं और जाके कोई वीडियो देख लोगे, but आपको बात तब समझ में नहीं आएगी. समझ में तब आएगी जब आप खुद बैठ के अपना दिमाग लगाओगे. And that is something which is very, very essential, right? Okay, so that was when we are talking about the past year questions. Next is about mocks. Right? Of course, everybody knows you need to attend mocks, right? Mocks are something which are very, very crucial, right? So even if your syllabus is not complete, you still have to attempt mocks, right? So you start attempting your mocks right from the word go. Okay, so if you're preparing now, if you're somewhere middle in your syllabus, or whatever, start attempting mocks, right? Attempt mocks in an exam-like condition, which means that for 2 hours, continuously, no disturbance, right? There should be no disturbance when you are writing your mock. So you tell your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your dog, whoever else there in your house, ki boss, I am writing my mock and I should not be disturbed. If it is possible for you, I would recommend go to a center and write the mock, right? If you are a Clat Possible student, then please, and you are in a city where we have a center, go and write the mock in the center, right? If that is not possible for you, then at home, try to write the mock between 2 to 4. That's usually at the time when you have your exam. So the time when your exam is going to happen, that is when you write the exam, and 2 hours continuously is how you write the exam. Very, very important, right? Because when you are writing the mock gives you, it's supposed to be exactly like when you are going to write the final paper, right? So all the conditions should also be similar. Only then are you going to get the best results, right? Of course, I think this everybody is aware of. Attempting mocks give you time management since you're doing all the sections together. All that is fine. Now, specifically when I'm talking about legal reasoning, why are mocks super, super important? Apart from practice, is they are a beautiful source of your current legal knowledge. Now you have to understand whether you are writing a mock with us or you are writing a mock anywhere else. This mock which you are writing, it is giving you the source of the current legal knowledge. It is telling you that, this is, if a passage has come to you, that particular passage would be something which is important. So then you do your own research on that particular topic, right? Google it. Google whatever is the, let's say you get a passage on, defamation on the Rahul Gandhi case, right? Then what do? You do your research on that, right? So whatever is the passage that you get, please do research on that. And that's a very important source of your current legal knowledge, right? That's a very, very important takeaway right now, right? Of course, it teaches you to how to handle pressure. All this is something which I think all of you are aware of. I'll not, go through that again. And of course, analyzing your mocks. Analyzing your mocks, very, very, very essential. Just giving mock is not sufficient. You need to understand your takeaway from the mock also. We have other sessions in which we have spoken about how to analyze a mock. So I'm not going to spend time here on how to analyze a mock. But yes, this is something which needs to be done. And this is something we just spoke about, score versus rank. In Clat, what is important is your rank. So when you are doing your mock analysis also, always check your overall rank and also your section-wise rank, right? Because sometimes if the section is difficult, or it also depends on the type of questions which come in your mock, so your score as well as your rank might be going up and down. So you will actually be able to gauge that where am I standing? Where is it that I am, doing well? Where is it that I need to put in more effort, right? So that is something which is very, very important. Having the knowledge कि भाई कहाँ कमी है तभी आप improvement कर पाओगे. अगर आपको पता ही नहीं है कहाँ कमी है तो बस improvement फिर किस चीज में करोगे, right? So that is something which is important. Okay, now the next most crucial topic, jiske liye I think most of the students have, kind of having trouble, is always the current legal knowledge. Now, always remember, current legal knowledge is something which you can improve upon by reading, eclectic reading of various concepts, whatever has been in the news is something which you do, right? Whatever are the latest bills, amendments, acts for the past 3 years. Always remember, current legal knowledge for legal is not just this year. Okay, this is for past 3 years. And a very good reminder of that is the sample paper which has been sent this year by the consortium. The sample paper which has been released this year by the consortium has the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 2021. So it is talking about the amendment which took place in 2021. Right, so that is like this is 23 going on, 22 and 21, right? So what you get to know from analysis of this sample question which is given this year is that when they are talking about contemporary legal knowledge issues, they are not just talking about what has happened this year, but it could even be as far as back as 2021. Therefore, when you're talking about bills, amendments, acts which have been in news, which have been kind of controversial, which have been the kinds which generally have been coming in the newspapers for the past 3 years is something which is or which may be appearing in your exam also, right? So this is something which you need to keep abreast with. Landmark judgment for the past 5 years. Now here I'm talking about judgments. Okay. Now always remember, when you are talking about judgments, these are final judgments, final decisions which are given by the court, right? Sometimes what happens is in the guise of, or, in your quest to collect legal knowledge, what you start doing is you start following, daily updates on things like bar and bench or live law and things like that. There, they give you, decision which has been passed during the course of a proceeding. So there's a case pending in the Supreme Court or in the High Court. There will always be orders which are passed, as and when the matter is listed before the court. But every time a matter is listed before the court, every time there is an order passed by the Supreme Court or the High Court, that doesn't become important for you from the Clat perspective. Until and unless you see a mention of that in the newspaper, that means that it is something which is significant. Okay, significant enough to, which needs your attention. Other than that, these very specific live law and bar and bench kind of websites, they cater to the interests of lawyers, lawyers and law school students at the max, right? But for Clat aspirants, you have to, kind of realize that every day updates on cases is not something which is very, very crucial for you. Until and unless it really finds its way into the newspaper, that means there's something significant has happened. Otherwise, don't trouble yourself that every day I'll sit and watch all the updates which are there in live law or in bar and bench. No, that's not something which will be a very good thing. It's not needed at all. Okay. But yes, judgments from, let's say 2018-19 onwards to about 2023, landmark judgments of Supreme Court, sometimes of the High Court, they become relevant, right? So that is something which you need to do. Of course, it helps in your GK section. Also, if you're preparing your current legal knowledge, another thing is when you're preparing for your current legal knowledge, always gain various perspectives. That is why, if you remember, in my class also, I keep telling you, do eclectic reading. Eclectic reading so far as legal current knowledge is concerned. Read from various sources, right? You make your notes would be crisp. Your notes are just for understanding what happened. Like, let's say if the MTP Act is concerned, what are the major provisions of the MTP Act which were amended? Okay, so there was a time period which was increased from when a medical termination or an abortion can take place from 20 weeks to 24 weeks. Why? Only in certain cases, if a woman is, maybe there is a rape, or if it's a minor. So there are very specific category of people where this particular change has taken place. So your notes on MTP would be very crisp. Okay, this is the amendment, this is the law. But when you're reading about it, read from various sources so that you get to know various views on it. You need not make your notes on all the views, but it will just ensure when you are attempting it that you have a clear understanding of it. Right? So therefore, this is something which is very, very important. Okay. Next is when you are talking about this, very important. If you do so much of reading of current legal knowledge topics, your fear of the unknown is taken. Why? Because every time you're reading about something new, it is always unknown to you. Right? And then you're so used to reading topics which you're so unfamiliar with that even if one of them comes in your passage in the final Clat paper, it will not be something that you get completely, amazed at, or you get completely shocked with, right? That is something which you are already used to, right? So keep that in mind, keep the prep so high that there is no fear that, okay, something new which has come in. You're comfortable with any new topic also, right? So that is something, another thing which will help you when you are actually preparing for your current legal knowledge, right? Take care. Let's move forward. Now, this is the last thing I had kept now, because this is very, 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 very specific to how you are attempting your legal reasoning questions. Abhi tak humne thoda general kara tha. Ye last topic aaj ke liye hai, but this is, I feel, one of the most crucial things which is needed so far as the legal section is concerned. Now, when you're looking at this last topic, that is reading the passage. When you're reading the passage, always remember you have to read it deliberately. Firstly, you have to read it, right? You cannot not read it, right? Whether it's a passage you are completely unfamiliar with, whether it's a passage that you are very, very familiar with, whatever might be the case, but you have to read the passage, right? Always remember that. And when you're reading it, there is nothing called passive reading that you can do. When you're reading it, you have to read it deliberately, you have to read it thoroughly, right? And how do you do that? By keeping your mind open. What am I looking for in the passage? I am looking for legal principles. You're supposed to identify what are the legal principles in the passage, right? Now, some passages, especially when it comes down to judgments, given by the court, or when it comes down to analysis of judgments, there are a lot of things which are given, or there is some view on a particular law or a particular judgment, then there are always these everything extra which is given, which you need to not apply your mind to, but you need to identify that, okay, this is the principle on which a question could be based, right? So this is, one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're reading the passage, and you cannot do that when you're passively reading it. Ki, ek baar pad liya, uske baad, I'll just go to the questions and then I'll see. No, the first time when you read it, always read it very, very carefully. Okay. And when you're reading it, there's always a main idea of the passage. I know this is more like something which you do in RC or at times in CR. But over a period of time, you realize that this is something which helps you even in a legal passage. So the same concept which you apply in RC and CR, you should have an idea by the end of when you read the passage that, okay, what was the main idea? What was the basic thing that the passage was about, right? Another thing is, what was the author's view and perspective? Keep this also in your mind. You get a lot of questions in which you are asked what is correct as per the author, what is incorrect as per the author, what can you infer? So these RCCR type questions, wherein your inference is being asked, or what is correct, incorrect is being asked, these things may be asked from the perspective of the law which is given to you, or these things may also be asked from the perspective of not the law, but the author's view, right? So keep this in mind, right? So keep this in mind, that how are you looking at it? So this is something which is very, very important when you're reading the passage. Okay. All this reading is also essential so that you don't go beyond the passage, right? You always tell you that whenever you're solving a reasoning question, you never go beyond the passage. You always stick to the passage. And that is something which is very, very crucial, right? So if you read the passage carefully, then you going beyond the passage is going to be, there's a lesser chance of you doing that, right? Whereas if you feel that, okay, this is something, maybe it's, even if it's a contemporary legal knowledge topic, you feel, oh, I've read so much about it, let me just run through the passage once and start solving. No. Very, very dangerous, whether it's a core theory based paper, any kind of contemporary paper, passage you've studied a lot about, still you read it and you do not go beyond the passage, right? You have to be very, very careful about that. And, there is this question which is asked to me a lot of times that, ma'am, should we go back to the passage? Is regression something which is crucial, something which we can do? Yes. Don't be afraid, especially if it's a very technical, fact-based sort of a question, or fact in the sense, very passage-based sort of a question. Then in that case, don't be afraid to regress. It's perfectly fine if you regress. It's perfectly fine if you actually go back to the passage also, right? So don't, fret about it. It's perfectly fine to do that. Don't just habit, every time don't make it a habit that you don't read the passage properly and you keep going back. No, that's not how it works, because a lot of times you have to understand the concept. So if you don't read the passage carefully in the first go, your likelihood of going wrong in the answers is very high, right? So in the legal section, always read the passage thoroughly. And then if still you need, let's say there's a question on punishment, that how much of punishment should be given, then you might need to, right? So then you can go back. Okay. Chalo. So that's about it, in fact, for today's session, I think, right? And I'm hoping that the session here was helpful, right? So let's call it a day. And, for the next 3 months, one thing I would recommend is, amongst all the things that we discussed, the first point, always keep that in mind, have a plan in place, stick to the plan, keep your morale high, and you will actually be able to do well in your exam, right? Those are the few things which you have to keep in mind, and you'll see that you will actually be doing well in the exam, right? So don't worry, and keep the effort on. If you feel you need extra help from us, or you have certain doubts, you're not able to understand, please feel free to ask us. We are Clat Possible. These are our social media platforms. You can get in touch with us through any of them, right? So So keep the prep high. Best of luck, everybody, and take care. Study hard.